You create what you want your world to be. And because you set it up that way, the things in your life will follow. But the biggest thing that makes this all happen is how your actions match this viewpoint. Because you bring in that chivalrous attitude and thinking, you begin to act that way and then all of a sudden treat others that way. Having chivalry is the property of being a knight that has the honor and integrity, a knight that navigates the world with the attitude of genuinely wanting to be good and nice and be kind to others. And despite the world that we live in, we can make the choice to have that chivalry, to create it for ourselves and for everybody else. In a world where there is more kindness, more good, more honor and integrity, more chivalry is a world I truly love to live in. Life is just straight up crazy. Now there's a guy to help you navigate through all of it. Welcome to the Madness Method. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Madness Method. This is Juan de Dios Garcia, and I just want to say right off the bat, I know what you're thinking. Where the hell have you been? I mean, you've fallen off the face of the earth, and you have every single right to think that. But I'm excited to say that I'm back, baby. I mean, I have to say that it was hard there for a minute while I was out. I got wrapped up into my whole entire world, and my world is a little crazy. The people were crazy, the environment was crazy, and honestly, my thoughts were crazy. And for a moment there, I just couldn't get out of my head and that bubble. And so I stayed in the bubble, a bubble of negativity, worry, and a feeling of upset at the world around me. Our world, your world and mine. So much that it brought me back to my senses so that I could actually talk about my experience in the hopes that you may find some relief in it. The kind of relief that makes you feel that it's not just you, that you're not alone. Despite what the world may say or think about, well, damn anything. Okay, so let me stop being so vague. About a month ago, I shared a video on my Instagram talking about making my wife some lunch. It was a thought bubble that I had at the time that reminded me of when my pops used to make lunch for my mom every single day of his blue-collar career. And it stuck with me. And I found myself doing the same thing for my wife, making my wife lunch as she headed out for work before me. So since then, it's gotten over 50,000 views, almost 100,000 now, and hundreds of comments. People saying how lovely it is, others saying congrats on caring for your wife and what a great gesture. What a great example that your pop set for you, and now you get to pay it forward, things like that. But what I noticed the most were the comments about the act itself, like it was rare. Comments like, I wish my husband did the same thing for me, and I wish more people were selfless like you. I took a moment to answer every single one of the replies, thanking them for the comments. Then I made the mistake of looking at my Twitter feed and YouTube feed, where, well, I got to see our humanity at its best and unfortunately at its worst. So typically my Instagram feed is filled with all these dogs and cats with voiceovers that make me laugh, they make me smile. My Twitter is filled with people acting in a way that I think humanity just should not act. And I know I could easily change the content of what I see. But in the moment, I almost wanted to feel the anguish again of what is really out there. Almost like the reminder that I still have work to do on the inside, that I still have a voice that needs to be heard, to remind my fellow men and women that the world can be a better place. And so here I am about to talk about one simple thing that I believe that we can all agree on. Now, over the course throughout history, we can find moments where the world is at its worst, and we can also find moments in the world where it's at its best. And I think for the most part, we can also agree that there are probably more worse moments than there are best moments that we can remember. Moments like how 9/11 was a horrendous day. Like the 13 kids that got saved in Thailand was a good day, and so many more. And so we can agree on that for our entire life. And the ones that come before and the ones that come after, that we can all say that there will always be these kinds of moments, good and bad. One cannot and will not exist without the other. For so long as we can distinguish good and bad, right versus left, up versus down, we will always have one and then the other. So that said, I think we can also agree on that we prefer one over the other. Now, if you're listening to this right now, you're probably drawn to this podcast because it may bring more light into your world than it does dark. So I'd venture to say that you, as well as I, prefer the good over the bad. That makes sense, right? Great. So then let's take a moment and then remember that time. All right. So early in January, my wife and I were keynote speakers at a conference in Albany, New York. It was one of those trips that when I told my mom and most people around me that mattered that when I was heading to New York, she got excited. And oh, you get to see sightseeing and do all these things. And I said, no, Mom, I'm working. I'm going to Albany. And she said exactly what most people say, which is, where is Albany? Albany isn't much to write about, but it was my residency for those few days that I was there. I went on a morning search for a good coffee place, which is usually my habit, and I found a place. I entered and I made an order and then just sat and I prepared my speeches over the weekend and stuff like that, right? So during that time, I witnessed a lot of regulars that come in. The workers seemed to know these people and they were friends with the other patrons. It was really nice to see. But the barista asked the lady for her order, and the lady continued to proceed with all these lists of changes. Like, I'd like this parfait, but please can you put it in a different container because I'm going to be carrying it home and the one that you give me typically, falls over or something like that. I have to take it to a friend, and can I have a different bag for my pastry because I don't like the way it gets mushed in and stuff like that. So the worker heard all these requests and asked if it was okay if that she gift wrap it. And then did it such a way that she told the lady, I made it so that it sits higher in the wrapping so that it doesn't have necessarily get smushed. It has more room. This container holds a little bit better in your cup holder in your car, so I'm giving you this. And a guy was sitting next to me. He spilled his coffee, and because the lid was a little bit too loose, I guess when he was trying to put a little bit of cream in it or something like that, he told the workers so that they knew about it and that there was a mess and asked for some napkins to clean it up. They said, we got it. They cleaned the mess up, and then they met him a fresh cup of coffee. He said, you didn't really have to do that. They said, we know, but we wanted you to have it anyways. So here I am sitting watching all of this and asked this gentleman if he had witnessed this kind of service where he's from. He's from Boston. He said, well, not in the downtown area, maybe a bit more where I live, which is outside of the Boston area. And I told him similar. Living in Northern California, I can say that well, as a younger generation doesn't necessarily think much outside of themselves generally, and experiences like this are hard to come by. So I could remember that there was a time when that was the norm that people were just genuinely nice to one another, that a neighbor would help another out, that a stranger would offer their seat for another on the bus, that a door would be opened, allowing another to pass through. I could remember a time that chivalry was alive. And then that got me thinking, is chivalry dead? Have we lost the lost art of kindness towards our fellow human? And the recent aha that came to me had to do with the moment when I came to my senses. The lesson that arrived that got me off my butt and onto this podcast. The lesson of the chivalry that is dead and alive. Okay, let me explain. So many years ago, I decided that I was going to take ballroom dance lessons. I was a dork in high school. I really just wanted to learn how to talk to girls, a decision that would necessarily impact my life in more ways than one, I'll tell you that. While I was taking lessons, I was fortunate enough to attend my first dance event. If you're unfamiliar with the world of ballroom dancing, then let me just give you some insight to some of its natural properties. The way martial arts teaches respect for your opponent and the dojo, the way sports teaches you to respect your team and the overall goal, ballroom dancing teaches you to respect the partnership and the community. Two things that I didn't know I needed to learn. So at this event, I had my first fancy dinner. By fancy, I mean they had more than one knife and more than one fork. They put a linen napkin on your lap. I've never done that before. So my teacher taught me how to eat, how to use your utensils from the outside in, that there was a difference between your bread plate and your dinner plate, and that your drink was on your right and then the bread was on your left. I was taught manners. I was taught to eat at the pace of the company that I was with and not to scarf my food down. And then also carry a conversation was part of being social. I learned how to ask a lady to dance and how to escort her back to her chair. I learned that how you tie a tie speaks volumes, and that it would show me how to be meticulous in other parts of my career. So in those moments, I learned to add chivalry and honor to my tool belt. Tools that I still use to this day. I learned a lot in those early years of my career. But the biggest thing that I learned is where chivalry is not. I learned that so many haven't learned what I have learned. And that by learning these things, I've included myself in a generation before me that had this tradition passed down to them from before and those before them. And that this was a very exclusive club to which there aren't many members. A lost art, if you will. So I found myself a man amongst boys at an early age as I opened the door to let somebody in and walk first. While others weren't even aware of those around them, I learned to be completely aware and then to pay attention to when this tool could be used. And I'd receive compliment after compliment just for doing so. And I can't help but feel that this art is dead in this world. Social media and the news are constant reminders to me that this is indeed a lost art. The sensitivity of every single subject matter has caused many to be, well, quite the opposite, insensitive. The peace that we desire has been demanded by many with violence and havoc. No one wants to give an inch, and all sides think that they're right. Think of the most divisive subject in this world today, and you can find that the hatred in there amongst many, and the kindness that's thrown out the window. And then that both sides of the subject will tell you that their side is right, to do what they do, including causing chaos to get their point across. So I see this and I think, yep, chivalry is dead. And this was the rabbit hole that got me stuck. This was the matrix that sucked me into thinking that this was our world, is our world. But just in that very moment that I was feeling upset, I saw a post on Twitter and Instagram. 3 gentlemen helping out an elderly lady get into her car. The elderly husband was clearly having a hard time, and so these 3 men came and they helped. Watching these 3, I couldn't help but feel joy in my heart. Out of the kindness of their heart, and they were helping out and their fellow human being that just needed it. The same social media that shows me the dysfunction in our world was showing me the beauty of it, the light in the darkness that maybe, I don't know, this time that we're in. The same day I turned to Instagram and find in my feed this guy named Jesus Morales, a guy that everybody should be following on Instagram. You should check him out. He buys out taco stands for an hour and then invites everybody around and hands them out free tacos to everyone who comes. And then all of a sudden he gives them a big fat tip as a thank you at the end. This guy who also finds workers at Home Depots and hires them just so he can take them to Disneyland and give them an experience that they've never had before. All with him and his video crew for that day. He pays them generously and then he gets an experience of a lifetime. To see the smiles on these guys' faces is worth it alone. So I look at that. And I smile to myself and I go, yep, chivalry is not dead. It's alive and thriving in the hands of these amazing souls. And just in case you're wondering, what is chivalry? I'll tell you. Chivalry is defined as the sum of the ideal qualifications of a knight, including courtesy, generosity, valor, and dexterity in arms. There is good in this world. There are knights fighting the battle by being good to one another, by helping out their fellow man, being courteous and generous with their time and their wealth, bringing valor to their community, and having the ability to create for others. Recently, I was walking into a coffee shop when I noticed two ladies walking out. I rushed to get to the door so I could open it for them and make their way for their exit. They walk out and they say thank you. One turns back and says, "I'm glad to see that chivalry isn't dead." It isn't. It's alive and well. And just as much as my world was dark for a time during my absence, where all I could see was the darkness and the bad and the pain and the suffering, I suffered. But in there was also light. There was a breath and goodness. It just needed me to change the channel, to flip the switch, to see that there indeed was another side of things. And in the flicker of a moment, I was back, just like that, back into the world that I love, the one where chivalry thrives, all with my fellow human beings. Is it really that simple? As simple as flipping the switch, as changing the channel? It's my belief that the answer is yes, it's that simple. Imagine your world for a moment. Maybe it has ups and downs, maybe it has good and bad, maybe it's right and wrong. The question isn't, what is the reality of it all? Because as we have established, it's all reality. It's all there. Rather, it's what do you want to make of it? What do you want your world to be? And so I ask, what do you want? Do you want it more up or more down? Do you want more good or more bad? More right or more wrong? Did you make your decision? Great. Now do that. If you're like most, then you have a habit of watching one channel, listening to one specific station, feeling a certain feeling, and based on your desire, you can say whether or not it's what you want. So here's the simplicity. If it's what you want, then keep doing it. Great job. Keep it up. But if it's what you don't want, then change it. Change the channel. Switch the station and use your brain to tell your body what to focus on and feel. Make your world the way that you want it by thinking of it that way. Make it that way by listening to the things that make it so, by watching the things that make it so, by feeling the things that make it so. Make your resources match that. Your social media and your shows, your friends and your conversation. It's funny because one of my personal rules is no politics, meaning I don't talk a lot about politics with many, mostly because it's such a charging subject. And I don't desire to spend my time talking about a subject that I really don't care about. So I don't talk about it. And because of it, my world does not see much of those politics. My social media and the shows and my friends and conversations, rarely do I actually have that as a point of subject. So what's the point? You create what you want your world to be. And because you set it up that way, the things in your life will follow. But the biggest thing that makes this all happen is how your actions match this viewpoint. Because you bring in that chivalrous attitude and thinking, you begin to act that way and then all of a sudden treat others that way. Having chivalry is the property of being a knight that has the honor and integrity, a knight that navigates the world with the attitude of genuinely wanting to be good and nice and be kind to others. And despite the world that we live in, we can make the choice to have that chivalry, to create it for ourselves and for everybody else. In a world where there is more kindness, more good, more honor and integrity, more chivalry, is a world I truly love to live in. And that, my friends, is the method behind the madness that is the chivalry that is dead and very much alive. Thank you all for listening. We're going to catch you next time. Hey, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Madness Method podcast. If you really liked it, hit subscribe, make sure you share it with a friend, and leave some great comment in there somewhere. And if you didn't like it, don't tell anybody. We'll catch you guys next time.